From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, I'm Rob Cairns. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief technologist at Studying Digital Marketing. For those who listen to this podcast, you know I love interviewing authors, and this podcast is no exception. Today I have Beau Dromiack with me, and he's the author of Super Architect. And this is a really good look at architects and what they do from a man who's very insightful. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. This episode is brought to you by All-in-One WP Migration, the most trusted WordPress migration plugin with over 60 million sites served. Whether you are switching hosts, changing domains, or moving to a new server, All-in-One WP Migration makes it one click. Try it for free at WordPress.org or visit servemass.com for pro features. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here, and today I've got my guest, the writer of the Super Architect, Mr. Beau Dromiack. How are you, Beau?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. You were kind enough to share your book with me before this record, and we'll get into it. Really enjoyed it. How did you get into the world of architecture? Because just from talking to you, you're pretty fascinating. You teach at a university. You have a practice, you've written a book. How did that all come about?
You know, early in my career, I started architecture, interestingly enough, as a junior in high school. And I just had very rare for that to happen. My dad found me a job in this teeny small architecture firm and during as a junior in high school. And so I would work, and this particular architect, I'd build models and draw and all this stuff. And this particular architect would, when he was tired of me or I was annoying him, because I was as a kid kind of annoying. I'm a little less annoying now, but so he would kick me out of the office and send me to the construction site where they were building the projects that we were designing, and then I would come back to the office, after my exile, and he'd come me back and I'd work on drawings and such again. But what triggered me early on was that during that same period of time, I was in a technical architecture drafting class in high school, and the professor's name was Mr. Kroll, and all he did was yell. He taught shop, he taught carpentry, and his whole fear in life was someone's going to cut their hands off or something, right, in high school. So he was always loud, and so in the drawing studio, he was still the same volume. His volume never changed. It's a quiet. He's not trying to, over air hammers or whatever. He's not trying to. He doesn't change his volume. But he said something one day that really struck me, and I didn't believe him because it was very arrogant. He said, he's yelling at all of us, saying that, listen, if you have bad lettering in this profession, you're going to get fired. And I said, I thought to myself, give me a break. Who's going to be fired for their lettering? So in those classes, your hand drawing and craft is a very central part of what you're doing. So I start at this new job, and they walk me in, and there's one guy there. And then two tables, me and one other. It would be one for me and one to be occupied. And the guy says to me, I asked the guy, well, who's sitting there? Because it looked like someone was sitting there. He said, no, this is your table. We fired the guy Friday. And I said, wow, as an inquisitive high school kid, I said, well, why'd you fire him? Well, because his lettering was bad. He literally said that to me. The lettering was bad. I thought, what the hell's happening? My teacher got done yelling at us. Yeah. I didn't believe him. So I realized something, and that began my interest in, I realized how little I know. And so I started just learning everything. So when I was on the construction site, building the thing I was helping draw, I started to see the world differently. I started seeing the connection between physical reality and let's say the abstract elements of it. I started seeing this. I'm hearing my teacher telling me I'm going to get fired for bad lettering. I don't believe him. And there it is. Someone's got fired for bad lettering. It's all coming together as a craft and as a knowledge thing. So that kind of weirdly set me on a path throughout my career or I kept feeling like I need to know more, need to know more. And it's kind of just I don't know if I call it eccentricity or mental illness, but I can't help it. So as I progressed in my career, I would always take on new jobs that would put me behind a curtain of a new environment. I couldn't help it. I would always advance.
Mhm.
I'd always be coming in higher, maybe, and making more money and more responsibility. But best part
Yeah.
was more curtains. And I got addicted to that. So then I realized that my thing is teaching, working, and writing. I think it's the tripartite of a proper balance, at least the way I look at it. You teach what you write so you can organize and define your thoughts. You practice in the real world so you can actually see if those thoughts make sense or not. And then you mentor it, then you teach it. And those three things really turned me on. So that's why, I teach, work, and write. I'm working on the third book right now, and it's called my my untitled, epic, and glorious Odyssey about a fantasy world of architecture. So, I mean, I love doing this, but it's all about transferring wisdom. Everything I do is about helping the profession of architecture advance.
Yeah. There's one thing that comes to really light in what you were just saying. You kept moving jobs. I think you're driven by challenge too.
Oh
And
yeah,
I think
yeah.
that would be fair. And I see a lot of similarity, Beau, in you and myself, because I'm driven by challenge. And I tend to
Mhm.
hang around more people in my business life who are driven by challenge. So I
Yeah.
find that, is that the case? You like that challenge. You like being able to do something new and come in and make it happen.
It's exciting, and I think you're right. I didn't think of it quite like that. But the reality is, every
Mm.
time you face a challenge or an unknown challenge, you find out more about yourself. You find out more about the world you're in. And I feel like I just never, ever stop learning. I'm blown away. I'm actually kind of sometimes very blown away how little I know. Every
Yeah.
time I read a book, I go, Jesus, somebody thought of this 500 years ago or whatever. What the hell? It's just constantly learning, 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 learning. And I think that's just how I am, lifelong learner. I love it.
Me too.
But I think you're right. I think there's a satisfaction, a challenge on the other side of the coin. There are people who are afraid of that challenge. And I'll give a little side note here. I've hired a lot of people over the years. I've had to let people go over the years. And I've come to an observation about just recently about people. When they get to a certain age, and now this doesn't actually isn't about age as much as about personality.
Yeah.
There are people what I consider they hit the wall. They know the question is this: why are they not growing? Why are they
Mhm.
not advancing? What's going on here? Why am I hiring somebody with an amazing resume, but I'm having to
Yeah.
let them go because they're just in no way advancing? I came to this conclusion. If you are a lifelong learner, you're at the core an optimist and you want to learn, and you always are adjusting your whole career through knowledge you acquire over time. If you're learning, if you're learning an obligation to get a paycheck, not because you're a lifelong learner, but because, well, I
Mhm.
got to get promoted, so I got to learn this. If that's
Yeah.
your mentality, you're going to hit the wall somewhere in your career, earlier or later, because you're not doing it for the reason that's core for lifelong learning. And then you could see this, and you wonder, how are these people not growing? And I realize that's it. They don't have an optimistic view of being a lifelong learner. Therefore, they're not excited about new challenges, even at the age of 60. A
Yeah.
lifelong learner loves challenges. Whereas if
Oh, no
someone that's
question.
60, yeah, yeah. So that's just something I've noticed.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair observation. I mean, I'm like you. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm an avid reader like you, and I think
Mhm.
they go hand in hand, to be honest
Mhm.
with you. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a rule. I'm this year, I will probably read somewhere between 50 and 60 books, if you can
Mhm.
believe that. So it's
Yeah.
basically a book and a bit of a week.
Yeah.
Um, I've always got something on, and people say, but what do you do with that? And I think the secret is if you read a book like yours or any book off the shelf, and it's, say, a book on productivity, take two or three things out of that book and apply them
Yeah.
because there's no good learning all this stuff if you don't actually apply what you've learned either.
Exactly. And what you think, ask the question, what's our purpose? It's a funny
Yeah.
big thing. It's like I always ask the question, what matters? And the answer to myself is what you do next. But part
Yes.
of what you do next is how you transfer the wisdom you're acquiring. So like educate, grad students who are in their 20s, mid 20s, and they know what they know. And you kind of know what you know when you know it, right? And it takes a little moment to actually appreciate that. And I give you a little sidebar story. My daughter was a competitive chess player. I have 4 kids. And I would take her to her chess coach, and I would walk into the waiting room. And for years, I don't know why, I just had never noticed it before. But so while she's in there playing all this chess and great, I saw a painting on the wall, a print of a painting, and I was just sitting there one day, thinking and just looking at it, and it occurred to me, oh my God, it's a Victorian picture. It's got 3 or 4 women on one side of a chessboard, one woman playing, a guy playing. And so there he is playing, a woman and 3 other women behind. And I started realizing that he's losing. He's losing the game. And the girls are all kind of snickering, and the girl's trying to compose herself to who's playing him, but you can see he's losing the game. And I thought to myself, whoa, in that period of time, the implications of a woman beating a man in chess is like, wow. But the fact I hadn't noticed that, I didn't notice that little interesting, makes me I always think that you only know what you know when you know it, but when you do know it, you should share it with people. And I teach my students and my team, everybody can mentor. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be 60, 50, 40. You can mentor at the age of 10, 12, 13, whatever age. Just transfer your wisdom that you've acquired in that moment in time to anyone else. And then you're fulfilling, I think, a critical humanity role that I don't think is practiced enough personally. So,
Yeah, and I agree with the mentoring part. You can mentor at any age. I would say, when you mention that, I was thinking back to some college days of my 18, 19, 20s, and thinking I had a college prof who I was miles ahead in the class, and he knew it, I knew it. And he on a regular basis would look at me and say, "What are you doing here? We're talking about that assignment I would like to hand back to you." And I'm like, "But sir, this course had a 10% attendance factor to it." And he'd look at me and say, "Do me a favor, take these 3 students that are struggling. Here's the keys to my office, and get out of here and go help them." And, I never thought of it that way, but I realized I
it's
was actually
brilliant.
mentoring those students
It's how
to
I've
help.
just learned teaching now,
Yeah.
things that I've done automatically for years. I just get better teaching it. But then when I teach the students to teach each other,
Mhm.
what happens is really interesting. There's a problem in architecture, which is kind of an island mentality. And historically,
Yeah.
architects had that. Now it's changed a lot, I think, since. And so you have to have, sidebar real quick. You have to have, it's like a teaching violin, right? You can't teach violin like a group. One
Mhm.
person's got to work on their individual skills to develop those skills, and then they can join a group. And in that, amazing things happen. Architecture school used to be where you just focus on playing the violin, but you don't focus in any way of working as a group or as a team. That's kind of how I grew up in the profession. So what I emphasize with the students is that you're able to work better as a group if you, one, strengthen your individual skills, and then you mentor those individual skills to other people in the group. So you make yourself stronger by mentoring, you make them stronger by mentoring, and then they start mentoring people. Next thing you know, the whole group is strong and reliant on each other, and not reliant, I should say, they lean on each other's strengths without losing their individual identity of performance. And then that's a high performing team. Then everyone's happy. That's how I look at it. I think it's all tied together.
So true. What I like too about you is here you're teaching. And by the way, I think very highly of educators. I've got a couple profs that are back in my 20s that are still in my life as friends over the years because they made a difference to my life.
Oh yeah,
I've got a couple of high school teachers that are still in my life, and I'm not much younger than you are. I'm
yeah,
59 this year, so I'm in the same age category.
yeah,
I've
yeah.
got friends that have been lifelong educators, like full time. And it takes really special people because you're more than just an educator. Sometimes you're a coach, sometimes you're a health professional, sometimes you got to be a therapist.
Oh yeah.
We've all been there.
Oh,
And
totally.
and it's so
But
true, right?
but teachers, there's a different class of, I guess, categories, I guess. But the teachers that I think make the largest influence on a person's life, I do touch on this not directly as teachers in my third book, but are horizon seekers. So I think, why does someone teach, right? Ultimately, you're at the core, not money, not all the other stuff. At the core, not because there's not much money in it, but at the core, it's because you're seeing the horizon, and you think you might have some influence to make that horizon better, or at least help those people navigate a little bit better. I think at the core, that's what we do as teachers. That's how I look at it anyway. Like, there's so many, like, as again, high school is interesting. They brought a guy in to teach us about business.
Yeah.
And I had a really arrogant, super arrogant. And this guy was talking about business and all this stuff. And my arrogant attitude was, and he's sharing all this knowledge. My attitude was, what are you doing here? If you're a successful businessman, why are you here?
Yeah.
And I just think of how naive and stupid that is. Because this guy was a horizon thinker. He's seeing that he knows the value of what he knows, and he knows if I know it, I'm going to be better. That's more important to him than whatever money he has or doesn't have, doesn't matter. But it's just that weird, narrow arrogance that you have at youth that hopefully changes over the years. So you have
It's
something
so
to
true.
share. Yeah.
It's so true. It's one of those reasons I do this podcast, and you'll laugh at that, but I'm well over 680 episodes, which is unreal.
Mhm.
And it's to help and educate and teach people. And people laugh at me and people say, "But why don't you keep all that knowledge to yourself?" And I
Oh,
said,
no.
"Because I don't work that way. I like to share, I like to teach, I enjoy helping people. It's part of it too. And you just gotta keep helping people because that makes the world better and makes you better too."
It's so if you're an insecure person, you want to hold all the knowledge. If you're a
Yeah.
secure person, you see the advantage to a dynamic appreciation of expanding that knowledge. I've learned, years ago, like in school and just other times in my career, there are architects who they hide their ideas from everybody until the big reveal because they're afraid of
Yeah.
being criticized or challenged. But more
Yeah.
importantly, they're afraid that they have to actually address questions about whether the design works or not. So they hide it. And the premise is that they're very insecure. They're bad designers. I write about this in the first book about infinite ideas. It's simply this: if you have a secure view of your creativity and problem solving, then and you have infinite ideas. It doesn't matter. Here's
Yeah.
one idea, here's another idea. And if you have an idea and I have an idea, we can meld those together to make even a better idea. And it's this dynamic approach that makes everything better in the world versus this kind of approach where you're
Yeah.
hiding from everybody. And then it's just really sad, but it comes from security or insecurity. Best designers and the ones who can connect best with their clients, best connect with their external partners are the ones who are secure designers who feel like, hey, this is just one idea. Let's talk it out. Let's find the best idea. You do that, and I presented this at an AIA thing years ago. If you have that persona, you will win more work. You will
Hmm.
build longer, better relationships. You'll have a more satisfied team. If you take the approach that there's one way or the highway type, my way to highway, or just one idea, you're just alienating everybody. And that dynamic opportunities goes away to becoming just a static, reactionary thing. So you got to trust the fact that you can always have more ideas. And I
Yep.
think that's everyone's different, but that's kind of fundamentally in design. You should have that as a design discipline. And Da Vinci said it, he said it, you take your first idea and put it in a drawer, and if it's meant to be, it will come back. Uh,
Yeah.
that's a premise that's actually really true. Stick your ideas away. Don't worry about it. A best idea wins if you keep addressing it and thinking about it. So anyway,
Yeah. It's so true. Before we get to the book, I gotta ask you, what is the most fun project you personally have worked on?
my I have two that because they seem so impossible. And they're not big projects. I've had some really big projects. I did the Gamage. ASU has a Frank Lloyd Wright designed building called Gamage Auditorium. It was designed in the 60s.
Mm.
Uh, and I got hired to do the expansion to it. And to expand restrooms and add elevators. But I
Yeah.
was touching a Frank Lloyd Wright building. So it's like you're going to be infamous or you're going to be famous type of thing. Because it's a lot of people looking at it. The purpose of the building, and this is why it's a kind of a fun favorite story of mine, experience was my kids and my wife have been going to Gamage Auditorium for many years. It's a classical performance venue, very nice, and
Mhm.
see Nutcracker or whatever. And I would always hear about how bad the women bathrooms were because
Oh
Frank
yeah,
Lloyd Wright designed it
everywhere.
really, yeah, for men and really nothing for women to speak of. So my daughters would talk about, how the line's like 30 minutes to use the restroom, which in the performance world is really, really bad because dancers during an intermission, their muscles start tightening. The magic of the show for the audience starts to dissipate because you're waiting in line for a toilet.
Yeah.
So there was a woman who donated a bunch of money to fix this situation. I got hired and to do it. And so I remember coming home and telling my kids, hey, I won the project to renovate Gamage Auditorium. And they asked me, what are you going to do? I'm going to add restrooms. And they go, oh my God. They raised, I mean, it was hilarious. I couldn't
Yeah.
believe the passion. I said, whoa.
Yeah.
And they started telling me their stories of elbowing, I hate to say it, elbowing past
Oh, I
people.
get it. I
They
get it.
ripped it out. I mean, it's insane. So that
We
was
were,
one of them. It's a beautiful building. And I did a
yeah.
design concept of complementary but distinct, using a different brick pattern, but still matching the brick. And so
Oh
it's
wow.
got these two elevator cores and restrooms. And here's the other key thing. We decided to add only women restrooms. Now, I was studying trying to add both and renovate both. We didn't have enough money. And so I came up and working with the director there. She had an idea and she gave me some of her great knowledge. We realized it's 3-to-1, three
Yeah.
seconds to 1 second, 3 minutes to one
Yeah.
second. Women are in there for 3 minutes, man's in there for 1 minute. So if you take the women fixtures or the men fixtures times it by three, that's how many fixtures you need for women. And that's what I did. And they're beautiful bathrooms, perforated
By the
drywall
way,
ceiling.
I love that because I was just thinking when you were talking about it, we were at a concert recently at Scotiabank Arena, which is the home of the Maple Leafs and the Raptors in Toronto.
Mhm, mhm.
And Tiz looks at me, my partner, and says, I gotta go to the bathroom. And I said, I'm glad this intermission is 45 minutes.
Yeah,
And she
yeah.
looked
Oh,
at
it's
me.
brutal. Yeah, and then
It's
so
brutal.
so I went so we did airport entries into all the restrooms. And at the first
Awesome.
night of the show, like a stalker, I stood out of the exit of one of the women's restrooms just to see how, and and I was so happy. And also another
Nice.
quick story, so I watched women walk in and just walk out. Walk in, walk out, walk in, walk out. No lines, zero lines. And
Love
I
it.
got a chance to tour one of the donors, and she started crying. She's so happy. So I mean, that moves me a lot. The other project, real quick, is I did design the International Student Pavilion up at NAU, the first net zero building up there, and but with no money. So
Yeah.
that building had only $2 million as a budget for 10,000 square feet, which I was able to, because the dean and the director really wanted a building that represented their forward thinking about sustainable design. It's an international pavilion, so they're saying, hey, let's be an icon for our sustainable design principles. So when you visit from Japan or whatever, you can kind of get a feel for what we're all about. So I designed it. And I went around the whole campus. I mean that almost literally, meeting with people to raise money with the different entities, the student organizations. The dean was trying to find money, and we added it. We got the budget to like 4.7 million, and I got solar panels on it, and so on and so forth. And we did this huge sustainable design education program in it. And it's also a building that's designed as a net zero building, where and it's not perfectly net zero because it has a lot to do with how it's operated, but it's all designed for natural ventilation up in Flagstaff, which has got beautiful air. So my strategy was to save money and still get the benefit of saving energy without spending a bunch of money, was to use all the natural ventilation up there. So I have these louver systems that at 75 degrees outside, they open up on the lower level, and then the big, huge louvers on the roof open up. You get this Venturi effect and these huge fans. And it's just a great little jewel project, of pushing the envelope, finding
Love it.
like-minded people to help make it
Yeah.
happen. So those are my two favorite projects.
That's really cool. The book, why did you write The Super Architect, the book before and the book after?
Yeah, so Craft Advantage was the first book, and that's where I realized, and I hate to use this dramatic term, but where the profession's in trouble and doesn't know it. And because I took these opportunities and elevated to these different jobs, 4, 5, 6 years, 10 years, 12 years, whatever. I'd move around, and I'd learned so much. I started being in different parts of our markets, different sectors, and I started seeing how architects are being excluded from the processes. And I'm thinking, well, why is that? And then I started realizing, they're not being invited to certain things. They're not the first call from the client to, hey, what should I do with this project? They would call the contractor often. And then one day I was walking through, I was meeting with a contractor for a meeting, and normally we meet in the front room of the big fancy conference room, but happened to be filled. So they said, we got to go into the back room. So, okay, I walk with them for the first time. I'm walking through their office, in the bowels of their office. And we walk by a room that's essentially 10 by 13 feet, deep, maybe, a little less, a little longer. And it was full of monitors on the wall. And there's all these young guys in there. And then I noticed the program they're using, which is Bluebeam, which is a PDF coordination tool. I was one of 4 out of 300-person architecture firm that we were testing it. So I'm thinking I'm pretty cool because I got this touchscreen laptop. I got this cool kick-ass new software. I'm pretty cutting edge. Then all of a sudden I'm walking down here and I see this room full of Bluebeam, full of 6 people and they're working on it. And I asked the guy, what's going on here? And he said that Nash about 3 months ago, I couldn't believe this. Architects are so slow to change. I tell you, he said 3 months ago, Bluebeam came and presented to their leadership in back east. And then they presented how this software can help them coordinate documents from the architect better. And so I go, wow. So 3 months ago, we signed the line, and now we're doing this nationally across the whole country to put these Bluebeam coordination teams in there. And I said, well, that must cost a lot of money. And he said that they lose sometimes $1 million on a project from profit erosion because of bad architecture drawings, because the drawings aren't good. The craft is low. And that's when it clicked. It said that's the reason why we're not getting the calls first. Not all of us, but generally that you could see this decline. It's not because they don't like architects personally. It's that the architects are no longer doing their job like they used to do in the more analog period. So as a result, the contractor is spending money to finish or complete the architect's job so they can reduce their risk and profit erosion. So that's what craft advantage was that we're declining and the contractor is increasing because they're filling the craft gap that we're creating and their influence is increasing. So I talk about craft advantage, how to get that back up. Super architect is the forward-looking part of the book, which says, okay, now that we know this, now that we know about craft advantage, now we know about this potential interesting thing happening, how do we navigate the future? What's our proper posture as we look at the advent or the increasing power of AI and everything else? And so the whole book is about what kind of architect do we need for the future that can navigate the unknowns, be able to maintain the influence that architects used to have and grow that influence. What's the type of architect? So I define the super architect as that 3 characteristics. One is a value system, which is craft is care, care is our craft. Yes. Second is a skill system, which is all about hardened skills of imagination, creativity. And of course, the last is optimism and next level integration. I laid these 3 things out, and then I put them into a list of all of the things architects do, and then what contractors can do, what contractors with future AI can do, and so on and so forth. And it became really clear to me that those 3 things can be maintained as a domain of architects, regardless of what AI does, regardless of what the contractor does, that we have the most resilience. So if we focus on those domains and become the super architect, we'll be able to regain that influence that we've lost in the past that will help us make the better built environment, make a better profession. And one last thing on that, the profession's evolved into a very fractured profession. There's all sorts of, there's not a unifying core value anymore. Now, when I mentioned that lettering story at the beginning, that was a core value of the profession. If you had bad line work or bad lettering, you got fired. It didn't matter where you were in the country. Yeah. Well, that's changed with virtual tools where that core value craft is kind of diminished, as I've indicated. So now we're very fractured. We don't have a unifying core value. So the purpose of my books is all, and the 3rd book I'm working on is all about creating a unifying core value again. And it doesn't matter whether you're a talented architect or not. Craft is universal. You can be an average architect and still detail drawings very well, making the contractor's life easier. Then your influence increases. You could be the most brilliant visionary architect. You do the same thing. Craft increases, your influence increases. The whole profession's influence increases. We have to have that core value back again. And that's the purpose of my books. And that's why I wrote Super Architect, The Future of Architecture.
And what I would say is you spent a lot of time in the book, unfortunately, and I don't know a business conversation I've had with anybody that doesn't have two dreaded letters in it, and they are AI. And I think you had to, but one of the stories you tell in the book, you sort of drew a parallel to the photo industry.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
in the book, you said, well, look where the photography industry has gone. So I would argue and say, look where the web design industry has gone too.
Yeah.
And the other argument I would put out there is, but they're still not professionals. So
Right.
even though AI can do the job for you or some of the job,
Right.
does it do the same job a seasoned professional does? And my answer to that still to this day, and you're shaking your head, is no.
No. No.
So
In
I
fact,
would
that's the. Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
that's okay. I would argue that 100%. AI is a tool
Yeah.
that you should be embracing, but it's not the cause of
It's
job
not. So
loss.
I presented at an AIA symposium, and I started out with a big water, the classic 1970s water beds.
Yep. Yes.
I said AI is essentially an infinite water bed. You push here and water flows that way. You push here, you never know where it's going to go. So that is a very important thing. I also think in terms of a lawnmower, and I say this as a little tongue in cheek, but imagine you're pushing a lawnmower. It's a tool that's cutting the grass. But there are people who got their feet cut off from a lawnmower. There's damage and the lawnmower keeps going and runs over the kids' toys. And I feel like we have to own the responsibility of defining AI through use. Otherwise, it will be like the lawnmower running over the kid's favorite toy or your
Yep.
foot. And
Yep.
regarding digital photography, I love photography, and I was in the dark
Me
room a
too.
lot and so on. And the craft is insanely amazing, the analog nature of it, but even the digital nature of it. I've worked with photographers, and I see what they're doing. It's incredible. But what happens with the AI component, or with let's say the virtual tools, is it gives, on the good news side, it gives huge amount of creative freedom to people who are essentially very much lay people. And that's
Mhm.
awesome to me. They're changing their environment, and these
Yeah.
tools are helping them do it. And then, but at the same time, they don't know what they don't know. Essentially, they don't know how far it can go. They're not a skilled professional. And you look at any skilled professional using digital tools and with the high level of skill, it's like blows your mind. It's like, wow.
Exactly.
So AI
Yeah.
will always be, in my mind, and this is the point I make in Super Architect, there's a trap with AI, and I define it too. I define it really highly simply, and I mentioned this
You
before,
did.
I think, but AI is something that does something for you. AI is something that does something for someone else without you. And that's part of what impacts our jobs and industry and all that potentially. And the last thing is AI requires that you leave something behind. So if you're an avid user of AI and you don't write sentences anymore on your own, you just use AI, you're leaving behind the ability to actually think critically using language. You're
Yeah.
leaving that behind
You
out
are.
for convenience. And that's what we have to be careful of. This tool is so powerful, and it's just beginning, that if we give up our responsibility for craft, and remember, in my opinion, craft is directly connected to humanity. Craft is humanity. And when people don't, we talk about humanity and all that, it's all tied to craft. Whether you raise your kids as best you can, you build your house, you clean your house, whatever you're doing, craft is at all levels of our lives. It's our profession, it's how we treat people and so on. If we have a high level of craft, we have a high level of engagement with humanity, but it takes accountability and responsibility. If we fall into the convenience trap, or like I talk about in the book, the drive-through mentality, the drive-through convenience, I got to eat, so I'm going to eat yucky food or just average food when I could, that's going to, you
Yeah.
just do that. The standard just drops. And it's fascinating. We just have to be careful of that. It's an amazing tool. It's evolving so fast. And optimistically, I am a delusional optimist. I think we're going to be fine. There's going to be shake. Oh, one thing I'll tell you about AI and architecture, and this is just my opinion, and I do write about this, but there's going to be, we're looking at inflection points. And I think the first inflection point really was when we had virtual tools, when we started with accelerated change, reacting to moving faster and trying to maintain our core value of craft as an analog tradition. We started losing that. We didn't know it at the time, but that was an inflection point. The second inflection point, I think, is that one's happened already. The second one is going to essentially be the AI, where we start seeing AI being able to fulfill certain roles and so on. And so we're right now at that point, or coming to within 5 years, where it's actually doing some of our work for us in architecture specifically, more, not just renderings, more things like technical drawings, things like that. The third inflection point is the scary one, or the one we should be prepared for, and that's purpose of my books. And that is when AI gets to the level where underwriting companies, banks, financial institutions, and everyone else have confidence in its quality, they can start then, and I have this idea in my head where you can have like a bank or an insurance company or whatever, they have and like they do, they kind of review a context with their AI, and that AI says this is the probability of success and so on. Or architects will or contractors will use AI to do a bunch of technical drawings without the architect. They take those technical drawings, they run it through a new AI profiling machine, whatever, and it says, hey, these are 98% accurate drawings, or these are 95% accurate drawings. So it gets a 95. Then it goes to the underwriter. They do their thing, and they say, we only will accept AI-generated documents if they have a score of 95 or higher, that kind of thing. Now, this is without any architect. This is just machine learning generating the technical documents. That's maybe 10 years from now. When that happens, the architecture profession, if they're not focusing on what I define as a super architect domain of the super architect, and they're only focusing on competing with AI on technical drawings, they're going to lose. You're going to lose. Mm-hmm. If you focus on technical drawings for the future of architecture, you're going to lose. AI is going to take it over. So don't do it. Focus on technical knowledge, but not the mechanics of building the drawings, and focus on what makes us connected to humanity, craft, hardened skills, imagination, creativity, things that are unique to the architect vision, and of course optimism, next level integration. By the way, what that is you and I talking, for example. And you and I, because we're both optimists, can come across an idea that we can integrate into a new idea. We can bring in new people. We can come up, that's optimism. Like if you and I kept talking for hours and hours, we'd probably come up with a bunch of really amazing ideas. And then we can bring in other people. Next level integration is all about the optimism of bringing diverse points of view and something bigger. So that's the three inflection points. The big one is coming, and I believe when that happens, we're going to look at, like, all industries are going to have some impact from AI, and it's not necessarily bad. It's just life, life in a big city. As that about 45% probably of the profession is going to vanish. It's going to get absorbed into other parts of the industry. And what's going to remain are architecture firms that have such a specialty knowledge and application nature of their work that and they're adapting to AI properly and using AI, they'll be okay, I think. But anyone who does the commodity work, like apartment buildings or Starbucks or whatever, rapid, any architect doing that's highly at risk in 10 years, if not sooner. So that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, I would agree with you. You teach at ASU. You've been teaching for years at ASU.
Yeah, about 10 years now, 8 years, something like that.
Years. So I have to ask you, students change, and what they're looking for changes, characteristics change. What's changed in teaching architecture in the last 10 years?
What's changed in the education of the architect? Yeah, that's a very great question. We're in another academic inflection point that's happening. If you look at any education as a client and customer, and a provider, right? Students are customers. Students are essentially clients, and they pay money to get educated. When I was in school, there was vocational first, theory second. When I got into grad school, it was shifting from theory to vocational. And then over the last 15 years, 20 years, whatever, it's been mostly theory with a little bit of vocational. Now, the problem is students, the customer, leaves school and finds out they're not that skilled in the actual physical profession. And so they're not happy. And national organizations are starting to see that. NCARB, our National Registration Board, NAAB, which is our National Accreditation Board, there's a pressure now to start adding that technical expertise back. So essentially, the technique to use a violin, not just listen to beautiful music, right? And I'm a big fan of reality, and I'm a big fan that you got to learn the tools before you can actually do things with the tools. And Mies van der Rohe, Chicago architect, famous, Barcelona chair and so on and so forth. He used to have his students, and this is not unique to just him. It happened at the Bauhaus and others, where you just draw lines, with manually rotating your pencil, you're not allowed to sharpen. You draw all these different lines, different thickness, and so on. And it's a skill. When you're in the analog manual, you had to have that skill. Well, the students are yearning for practical skills to build their confidence when they go into practice. So my class I wrote called Success Empathy is all about that. It's all about those soft skills of practice that you only learn by being in the practice a long time. I'm pulling it way forward in their lives so they can see what it's like. So to answer your question, the profession, the academic world's changing toward trying to rebalance toward a technical application and a theory balancing it now. And so I think that's where we're headed. I'm super excited about that. One reason why, I'm kind of unique in the teaching world, at least we're in my cohort, because I do the three things. I teach, write, and practice. And so anything I teach, I know works in practice, and anything I write, I know works, and so on and so forth. So I don't live in a vacuum. As a result, and also I have this huge cross section of project types. Anything, name it, theaters, whatever. Labs, R&D, building, semiconductor. I got this huge cross section. So I'm able to kind of present a broader perspective, and students, I think, respond well to that, because ultimately 2 years of grad school is a small blip in time in your whole career. It could feel like it's everything. When I was in grad school, it's like everything matters, but it really doesn't. It matters a little bit. You should come out of school with confidence. And my big mission in teaching, and I tell this in my teaching cohorts, our job is to transfer wisdom, build confidence. That's it. Transfer what we know, build their confidence. So when they enter the profession, they have the confidence to adapt to all the pressures they're going to feel. And I think that's my goal teaching that's the philosophy I try to promote, not just to students, but of course to my teaching partners. And I'm surrounded by amazing teachers, by the way, all different, bringing all these different ideas, super brilliant people. We all have different things to offer. But bottom line, transfer that wisdom, build their confidence, and then we have a better profession. Yeah.
No, I agree with it. It's funny you talk about grad school being more theory. In Ontario, where I live, we actually have the government developed back in the 60s a series of technical colleges. And they did that on purpose because we all know that some students learn better by doing and some learn better by listening.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those students. I learn better. I'm a technical college grad because I learn better by doing. I don't do as well spending 2 hours in a classroom listening to a lecture. I know I don't. So I don't. And that's the other thing we have to recognize.
That's the human thing.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, yeah. I do a lot of presentations showing students how to build a building, for example.
Yeah.
I show them the actual details, and they're blown away. Now, just so you know, a lot of schools, even the school I teach at, will often start a student without any of that knowledge, and they just start looking at blocks and shapes and things like that, and not how's that wall built. And so that's always not correct in my opinion. The other thing I've noticed, which I'm super happy about, over those last 20 years, we evolved from individual work to group work.
Mm-hmm.
Now in the last few years, we've been evolving back to individual work with a teeny bit of group work. This is so much better. The students, their confidence is higher, their skills are refined. It's way better. So that's another thing that's changing in the education, which I'm happy to see.
And I would say group work at a higher education institute is a lesson in stress management.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah.
I was thinking as you're saying that, and I remember back in my days, like back in the 80s, taking a course, and the course should have been called Stress Management 101. Like, honestly, because it was laid out that way. And I used to swear at the end of it, this had nothing to do with the material, it had everything to do with managing yourself.
The problem with, it's not a problem, it's the reality at our architecture school, as an example. When we would assemble students, teams of 4, nobody taught the students how to actually be on a team. So it's like Lord of the Flies. It's kind of like, battling stress, and you learn a lot, by the way. But one thing that I started doing is teaching people how to be on a team. First thing I would do is, as a team, you guys need to decide who your team captain is. This is not a person who's a dictator. This is a person who's going to help manage the process of communication throughout the project, but has accountability that things are running smooth. And now it's like new to them. They're going, really? So they finally vote on somebody. And then the next thing I tell them is that you need to acknowledge the unique roles that are on your team. Some people are better at building models. Some people are better at using Revit and other software. Assign roles, because if you let people live in their strengths on a team, the team is higher performing. So if you sit there saying you're a great model builder, but you're so egotistical, you want to build the models even though they're better than you start eroding the high performance nature of that team. Yeah. So this is what I try to teach them.
Yeah, that's good teaching, because I also have a project management background, and it's the same thing when you manage projects, whether it's architect, tech, anything. You always want to play on the strengths of your team. That is a good project manager.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're everyone's happy, and you could tell a happy team. You could tell a high performing team because they're laughing. In architecture, anyway, I can walk into any room, any studio, and I could tell you right off the bat if this is a high performing team or not by how much they're communicating. There's laughter. You can feel the intensity of the work, but there's joy in it versus dread. You can feel it. I can feel it anyway. And happy team is a highly productive team usually. So,
so true. Love this conversation, Beau. I think what I would say, and I said this to you before we went to record, if somebody was not in the architect business and listened to or read your book, they would probably get a lot out of it, because a lot of the stuff you talk about is transferable, I think, across a multitude of industries. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Besides working in the architect business, I always like to ask, what do you like to do outside of work for fun?
For fun?
Yeah. What do you like to do?
Is that what you said, for fun? I missed that. My middle daughter says my whole life is a series of hobbies. I find hobby in just any activity, fun in any activity that's interesting to me at that moment. So I will shift gears, like, whatever it is, like I love to draw. I do like to read. I do like to think. I like to walk. I bake cookies. I have a 30+ year recipe I created 30 something years ago. And it's so glorious. I'm telling you, it's amazing. And I just refined it and refined it and refined it. So I enjoy doing that. I raise chickens. I have 40 chickens. So I like this challenge of the ultimate egg. The beautiful eggs, and these chickens are so amazing. So I do that every day. That distracts me a little bit. I like that. We have a cottage that we're renovating for like a family overflow Airbnb type thing. I love building things. So I'm in there building the kitchen, doing all sorts of stuff like that. So I'm very physical. I do all these. I love backpacking. I love designing backpacking gear, thinking about designing backpacking gear. What's a better piece of gear, and so on. So I'm constantly doing those things. The curriculums I teach, I'm working on adding new content to my success empathy class, because I got invited to a executive MBA program lecture class last year on EQ, emotional intelligence. And I was just like, they invited me because of the relationship I have with someone there. And it was just really, and I thought, oh my God, this is exactly what I believe. And so there's more stuff. So I got to add that in there so my students can benefit from what I learned. So that's what I'm doing. Plus, I'm winning work for my practice. I'm running around doing that. I love doing that too. So.
Yeah. Sounds like you got a pretty full life going on that you're enjoying. And that's the other lesson out of this. Don't do the stuff that you have to do. Do the stuff you enjoy doing, including in your career. Like, enjoy your career.
Enjoy the little things, enjoy the things that aren't even, I know that we're coming to the end, but I'll share a real quick story. My wife was in anthropology and archaeology, and she shared with me an image, and I got to find it someday. She told me the story about the image. I'll be real quick. There's these researchers in South America from Europe, German researchers, and they're researching native tribes, native communities down there, had not seen and worked with, let's say, the outside world. And they come back after their research, and they come back to Germany, and they're looking at their photos. And one of the photos shows 4 people hauling this canoe up this rocky ravine, clearly not fun from any normal perspective. The two in the front were the two German researchers holding the front end as they're navigating. And the two in the back, the heavy side, were two natives. The natives, and they noticed this, and they didn't notice it until they come back to Germany and they look at these photos. They noticed something, that the two natives were laughing. They're smiling. And the two Germans in the front, the two Europeans, were like scrolling. Oh, this is the worst thing in the freaking planet. I can't wait to get done with work so I can have my beer and relax. Finally, they go back the following year and they find out, they're wondering why was the local native community enjoying what was going on and the Europeans were not. And they found out something pretty profound. And that is that tribe, that group of natives have no word for work. It's just life. And that's idea, it's life. And why cry, laugh, why grimace, just enjoy it, right? So our culture, we have a word for work and we have a word for life. We often separate it. I don't separate it myself. I look at it as all one thing. And but that story always struck me, is that our culture drives our attitude toward challenges. And that's just kind of the way it is in all cultures. One culture doesn't see it as a challenge, another culture sees it as a challenge. Therefore, their stress maybe is higher. It's a very interesting thing that I'm totally out of my league talking about. But I'm just saying it's an interesting thing to me.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So.
I know your books are on Amazon.
Yep.
Your books are on Audible as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good place to get them. Where's the other really good place to get to know more about you or get in touch with you?
The other book?
No, where's a good place to get to know you more
to
get in touch with you? Sorry.
This sounds pretty crazy. My email, the best way to get to connect with me is texting me, my cell phone, because I'm so busy, 602-920-2680. My email is beau@dromiack.com. Those are kind of the best ways of getting a hold of me. There's other ways, but I'm thinking of the surefire way. Because I'm very busy, if you want to reach me, and I don't mind anyone texting me, just say who you are, and I will answer. I give my phone out to all my students, and I've been told in the past by other professors, never do that, never, ever do that. I have no idea. I give it to everybody. So, that's the best way to reach me.
Beau, thanks for an amazing conversation. Thanks for sharing the book. Thanks for sharing the wisdom about your profession. So much appreciated.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. A lot of fun.
Have yourself an amazing day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again to our sponsor, All-in-One WP Migration by ServeMask. Export your entire WordPress site in one click, import it anywhere. No server access needed, no command line, works with every hosting provider. Free on WordPress.org, or extension at servemask.com. A very special thank you to Beau for joining me on this edition of the SDM Show. The SDM Show is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much every day. My mother, Ann Cairns, who's still doing really well and is an inspiration. And of course, Tiz Maroney. And Tiz, I know I've said it, but thank you so much for all the inspiration you give me every day.